The case of Jessica Gutierrez. Jessica Gutierrez, warmly known as Jessie by her family, was born on December 3, 1981, in the United States. She was the youngest amongst her three siblings. The family lived in a modest mobile home located in the rural area of South Carolina. In 1983, the tranquility was disrupted when Jessica's parents divorced. The children were left in the full custody of their mother, Deborah, while David Gutierrez, their father, moved to Mexico, maintaining a transient lifestyle between there and California. Following the divorce, Deborah worked diligently, finding employment at the United States Postal Service to meet the needs of her family, ensuring their well-being despite the challenges of raising 4 children alone. In June of 1986, Deborah found herself entangled with a man whose behavior grew progressively controlling and problematic, exacerbated by his increasing alcohol consumption. Eventually, his behavior reached a tipping point, leading to his expulsion from Deborah's life and home. However, Deborah's hope for respite was short-lived as her life plunged into further darkness. On June 5, 1986, a seemingly typical early summer day unfolded in South Carolina. The weather was pleasant, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, clouds ornamenting the sky. The family spent their day indulging in outdoor activities and nurturing familial bonds. The day concluded with Deborah preparing sandwiches for dinner and painting Jessica's nails before the children were put to bed. Jessica, maintaining her usual habits, requested to sleep in her mother's bed, a request granted by Deborah. However, when her elder brother experienced discomfort and pain later in the night, Deborah allowed him to sleep in her bed, relocating Jessica to the room at the hallway's end beside her sister, Becky. The following morning, Deborah awoke to a scene of subtle chaos, marking the inception of her ordeal. The front door was ajar, the family dog wandering restlessly, and a set of curtains lay on the floor, with the mosquito net appearing to be forcibly removed. Jessica was missing. Her absence was accentuated by Becky's ominous statement attributing her disappearance to a man with a magic hat and beard. A state of panic ensued as Deborah combed through every conceivable hiding spot, hoping to find Jessica playing hide and seek. Her efforts were futile, leading her to frantically search the surroundings of her home, eventually reporting Jessica missing at 9 a.m. The ensuing investigations by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department revealed no signs of a struggle nor any missing items from the house, apart from the papers scattered on the bedroom floor. The conjectures pointed to a potential kidnapper entering through the back window, abducting Jessica without waking her, and exiting through the front door. Search operations extended to the neighboring woods and abandoned structures in the predominantly rural area of Red Bank, especially rural back in 1986. The speculations, searches, and Becky's consistent statement about the man with the magic hat continued to haunt the family, embodying the relentless pursuit of truth and justice in the light of such grim circumstances. They searched many woods and areas with small streams and ponds for Jessica. Searches were made using off-road vehicles across large areas filled with nature. The sheriff's department sent a plane to fly over the area, hoping to find some trace of the girl, but none of the searches were successful. Deborah was taken to the sheriff's department to answer questions about what happened in the last 24 hours. She insisted she didn't know what happened to Jessica, but was sure about who did it. She blamed her ex-boyfriend for taking Jessica, but he said he didn't know where she was. The police also looked into Jessica's father, who was in California at the time. No charges were made against them. On June 7, the FBI and South Carolina law enforcement joined the search. Bulletins were sent nationwide. This was 10 years before the Amber Alert system and way before the internet era, so communication between departments could be slow and cumbersome. The sheriff's department tapped Deborah's phone to monitor all incoming and outgoing calls, in case someone called with ransom demands. The police told reporters they believed Jessica was taken from the mobile home and didn't walk away on her own. Weeks into the investigation, The detectives only had one physical clue found at the home. A fresh fingerprint was found on the open window at the back of the house, believed to be the point of entry on June 5. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, but no matches were found. In September 1986, the sheriff in charge announced they had a suspect but didn't have enough proof to charge him. The suspect had failed a polygraph test, but since those aren't admissible in court, it wasn't enough for an arrest. After this, there were few glimmers of hope in the following years. In 1987, police in Kansas contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, saying they had a girl matching Jessica's description. Deborah flew to Kansas hoping to see her daughter, but it wasn't Jessica. Deborah returned to South Carolina, determined to keep Jessica's case alive. She and the sheriff often disagreed about the case and argued over the investigation. Deborah decided to conduct her own investigation and keep Jessica's case in the public eye. In June 1989, Deborah told the state newspaper she had found fibers in an abandoned car connected to a family friend serving time in North Carolina for assault. This was a major revelation. 2 years earlier, Deborah had received a letter from an inmate in North Carolina claiming his cellmate had confessed to abducting and killing a 4-year-old child in 1986. The cellmate, Thomas McDowell, was a registered sex offender living in Lexington County at the time of Jessica's disappearance and was known to the Gutierrez family. Thomas claimed he had killed Jessica because she recognized him and said he had thrown her body into a landfill. Thomas also said he had a beard and was wearing a tall cowboy hat at the time of the abduction. Thomas' cellmate not only informed Deborah but also contacted the police with this information. This led investigators to extensively interrogate Thomas, who agreed to disclose every detail about the crime to the detectives. However, he demanded immunity in exchange. Of course, it wasn't a deal the state was willing to make, so he remained in prison in North Carolina, and Jessica's case officially went unresolved. Deborah felt frustrated and angry. In 1989, she told the state newspaper that it felt like they had no rights and that the system wasn't working for the victims. She was particularly upset that no charges were brought against Thomas. After all, he had confessed, and his version matched the events of June 5. But there was something even more surprising. Thomas's fingerprints were taken and found to match the fingerprint found on the Gutierrez family house window. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, Deborah publicly criticized a Lexington County Sheriff's Department and accused them of mishandling her daughter's case. She said that for years she had been afraid of what would happen if she dared to contradict the sheriff, a powerful figure in South Carolina. But after 2 decades, she wanted the case to move forward and knew she needed media attention to achieve it. Local news had access to a recorded telephone call between Deborah and the sheriff in June 1986, just a few days after Jessica's disappearance. In the call, recorded by the Sheriff's Department's wiretapping unit, Deborah argued with him about the case, concerned and demanding answers as he was pulling investigators off the search. The sheriff replied that he would give answers when he had them, and then threatened to pull all his agents off the case and send them home if she interfered with him. Of course, Deborah was angered by the sheriff's response, viewing it as a threat to her daughter's case. She asked him what the people who elected him would think if he abandoned Jessica, and he responded that they could elect him or not because he didn't really care what they did. In 2007, when the call transcript was made public, the sheriff said he remembered that Deborah had accused him of favoritism and not handling the case properly, and it had hurt his feelings. Deborah also expressed her frustration with prosecutor, indicating that she had been trying for years to get other agencies to take over the case, but he had not allowed it. The case was even reviewed by the prosecutor in 2007, but no action was taken to charge or prosecute any suspects. When consulted about it, he stated that most of the evidence was inadmissible and the little that could serve had an explanation and a reasonable doubt. He also said that without a body, the state would need much more evidence to secure a conviction. After this, the case fell back into obscurity, but its main protagonists were generating their own headlines. In 2014, Sheriff James Metz was charged in federal court with 10 counts of bribery and wire fraud, for which he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. In 2016, prosecutor Donnie Myers was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a utility pole and abandoning the vehicle. He was fined $1,000 and retired from public service in 2017. In 2021, 35 years later, the case sparked renewed interest. Sheriff Jacob, who was elected to office after James went to prison, announced that the county would collaborate with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to take a new look at Jessica's disappearance. In January 2022, finally, there was a breakthrough in the case. Police arrested 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell in connection with Jessica's disappearance. The subject, whom the child's mother had always suspected, was considered a person of interest in the case but was never followed up on. He resided in Lexington County in 1986. He was arrested at his home and confined to the county detention center. After the arrest, Thomas was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary for the disappearance and death of Jessica Gutierrez. Based on the arrest warrant media outlets have accessed, authorities identified a fingerprint of the suspect at the victim's house. However, it was not disclosed where the fingerprint was found or when it was identified as belonging to Thomas. Regardless, Deborah was aware of the existence of this fingerprint for years, and it was discovered on a window. For her, this was conclusive proof that he committed the crime, as she cleaned her windows every night, and only Jessica's kidnapper would have touched the glass afterward. In the same arrest warrant mentioned, authorities stated that the man was later identified in a photo lineup, and they also had evidence against him that he had told others he had kidnapped and killed the girl. After revisiting the case in 2021, special agents from the FBI and state prosecutors visited the area. Law enforcement agents from South Carolina assisted in interviewing over 125 people. The investigation was extensive, with over 3,500 pages of records reviewed, and 10 FBI field offices were involved in reviewing Jessica's case. The official statement indicated that the arrest was made possible thanks to many years of dedicated investigative work by local, state, and federal partners, as well as the determination of citizens who never forgot Jessica. Jessica's body has never been found, but perhaps this time, the subject will cooperate with authorities about the facts and disclose the location of the little girl. Deborah Gutierrez is still alive, but the long years waiting for answers have taken a toll on her. Her mental health has been affected by her daughter's disappearance, and this time it was Jessica's sister who spoke on her behalf after learning about the suspect's arrest. She said that her family never thought this day would come. She added that her mother fought tirelessly for 36 years for justice for Jessica, praying not only for a conviction, but also for the death penalty. She expressed gratitude on behalf of her family to everyone involved in the arrest of the man whom she described as an evil monster. Paradoxically, Thomas's neighbors considered him a quiet and reserved person who transported his work materials in a van and didn't seem to be a violent individual. Unfortunately, they will have to wait until the trial to find more answers. Apparently, Thomas has not admitted to the crime and has not disclosed what he did to Jessica. And that's the case for today. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you in the next episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Maria Elizabeth Ridolf was a 7-year-old girl who disappeared from Sycamore, Illinois, on December 3, 1957. Her remains were found almost 5 months later in a wooded area near Woodbine, Illinois, approximately 90 miles from her home. Maria was last seen by her friend on her neighborhood corner of Center Cross Street and Archie Place with an unknown man in his early 20s who called himself Johnny. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior, the suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Maria Ridulph. Maria Ridulph was born on March 12, 1950, to the marriage of Michael and Frances Ivy Ridulph in Sycamore, Illinois. She was the youngest of their 4 children and had 2 sisters and a brother. While many residents lived or worked on farms in the area, her father Michael worked in one of Sycamore's few factories, and her mother Frances was a homemaker. At the time of her abduction, Maria was 7 years old, 1.10 meters tall, and weighed 24 kilograms, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. She was an honor student, then in the 2nd grade, and had also received awards for perfect attendance at Sunday school at John's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Maria was also described as sensitive and afraid of the dark. Her best friend was 8-year-old Kathy Sigmund, who lived on the same street as the Ridulphs. On the afternoon of December 3, 1957, Maria begged to be let out to play because it had started to snow. After dinner, Maria and her friend and neighbor Kathy Sigmund went out in the growing darkness as the sun had set, near Maria's house. They played a game they called dodging cars, running back and forth trying to avoid the lights of oncoming cars. According to Kathy, after a while, a man approached them, whom Kathy later described to the police as being around 20 years old and tall, with a thin chin, light hair, separated incisors, and wearing a colorful sweater. The man, who said his name was Johnny, asked the girls if they liked dolls and if they liked piggyback rides. He gave Maria a piggyback ride, after which she returned home and came back with one of her dolls to show him. After Maria went back, Kathy ran home to get her mittens, leaving Maria alone with the man. When Kathy returned, Maria and the man were no longer there. Kathy went to the Ridulph's house to tell them she couldn't find her friend. Initially, the family thought Maria was hiding and sent Maria's 11-year-old brother to look for her. After he couldn't find her, the Ridulphs called the police, and within an hour, both police and armed civilians began a search in the town, but they couldn't locate Maria or Johnny, the man she was last seen with. The FBI, assuming that Maria might have been kidnapped across state lines, a federal crime, arrived in Sycamore within 2 days to assist local and state police in the search. The FBI and police interviewed numerous witnesses who had seen the 2 girls playing without anyone else present between 6:00 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Based on these interviews, it was believed that Johnny had approached the girls after 6:30 p.m., and the FBI concluded that Maria was kidnapped between 6:45 and 7:00 p.m. Maria's disappearance received national media coverage, and both President Eisenhower and FBI Director John Edgar Hoover took an interest in the case. The police continued to investigate various suspects in the area, including passersby, known sex offenders, and a local man who had given children piggyback rides. But they didn't develop any solid leads. Maria's parents appeared on television, radio, and in the press, pleading for the safe return of their daughter and seeking the public's help in finding her. On April 26, 1958, near Woodbine, Illinois, approximately 100 miles from Sycamore, 2 tourists looking for mushrooms in a wooded area along U.S. Route 20 discovered the skeletal remains of a child wearing only an undershirt, shirt, and socks beneath a partially fallen tree. The state of decomposition indicated that the body had been there for several months. The body was identified as Maria Ridulph through dental records, a lock of hair, and the clothing she had been wearing when she disappeared. Her coat, corduroy pants, underwear, and shoes were not found. There were no photographs taken at the crime scene. though photographs were taken of the general location without showing the body, because the coroner, James Furlong, did not want pictures of the remains to leak to the newspapers. Due to the crime having occurred within Illinois rather than crossing state lines, the FBI withdrew from the case and left it in the hands of state and local police. The initial autopsy could not determine the cause of death due to the advanced state of decomposition. On December 4th, investigators visited John Tessier's house as part of the search for Maria in the neighborhood. According to Tessier's stepsisters, their mother told the investigators that John Tessier had been home on the night of December 3rd, something they later testified was not true. Shortly thereafter, before Maria's body was found, the FBI investigated Tessier as a possible suspect. Sources differ on whether the investigation was triggered by a comment from a local resident or by John Tessier's parents themselves, trying to divert suspicion from their son when they realized he had the same name and general description as Johnny. Tessier and his parents told FBI investigators that on December 3, 1957, Tessier was in Rockford, Illinois, about 40 miles northwest of Sycamore, to enlist in the Air Force. This story differed from his mother's earlier statement, as reported by her daughters, that Tessier had been at home all night. He said he had been in Chicago on December 2nd and 3rd undergoing the required physical exams for his enlistment. On the morning of December 3rd, he visited the Chicago recruiting office, which was corroborated by records, and then spent the day sightseeing in Chicago before returning to Rockford by train that evening, arriving there at 6:45 p.m. Upon arriving in Rockford, he called his parents to ask them to pick him up and take him home to Sycamore, since he had taken the train to and from Chicago and had left his own car at home. Later, telephone records were found showing that a collect call had been made from the Rockford post office to the Tessier home at 6:57 p.m. that evening by someone who gave their name as John Tessier, as written by the operator. After making the call, Tessier met with officials at the Rockford recruiting office to drop off paperwork related to his enlistment. Officers confirmed that they spoke with Tessier around 7:15 p.m. that evening, although one officer also expressed some concerns about Tessier's credibility and behavior. Tessier was taken to the police station to take a lie detector test, which he passed. Based on his alibi and the lie detector test results, Tessier was removed from the list of suspects, and the FBI closed their report on December 10, 1957. In 1997, with no significant leads, Sycamore Police Lieutenant Patrick Soler closed the Ridolph case, which was 40 years old at the time, and named William Henry Redmond, a former truck driver and carnival worker from Nebraska who had died in 1992, as the likely man who had abducted and murdered the girl. Redmond had been accused in 1988 of the 1951 murder of an 8-year-old Pennsylvania girl, although that case was dismissed when a police officer refused to reveal the name of a confidential informant. Redmond was also a suspect in the 1951 disappearance of 10-year-old Beverly Potts in Ohio. The case was reopened in 2008 based on new information from McCullough's half-sister, Janet Tessier. According to Janet, her mother, Eileen Tessier, on her deathbed in January 1994, had said, "John did it. John did it. Those 2 girls and the one who disappeared. You have to tell someone." Janet interpreted the statement to mean that her half-brother John Tessier, who would soon change his name to Jack McCullough, had kidnapped and killed Maria Ridolph. John, or Jack McCullough, as he was known at that time, allegedly once threatened to kill Janet with a gun and sexually abused his half-sister Jean when she was 14. He was separated from the Tessier family at the time of his mother Eileen's death, and he was told not to attend her funeral. Janet Tessier said that she made several unsuccessful attempts over the next 14 years to get law enforcement, including the Sycamore Police and the FBI, to investigate her mother's statement. State police investigators reviewed the evidence and developed a new timeline in which Tessier could have kidnapped Maria and driven to Rockford in time to make a phone call at 6:57 p.m. and meet with the recruiting officers at 7:15 p.m. Under this new timeline, They determined that Maria would have been kidnapped no later than 6:20 p.m. The police search for Maria had started at 7 p.m. according to Catherine, who said she had returned home from a party at 7 p.m. and found the search had begun. Hoping that Kathy Chapman, formerly Sigmund, would review a series of yearbook photographs, the police took 5 group photos from the Sycamore High School yearbook of 1957. But John Tessier's photo was not in the yearbook because he had been expelled. The police obtained a contemporary photo of him from his ex-girlfriend, which differed from the yearbook photos in that Tessier was wearing a shirt instead of a suit, and the background was dark instead of light. Chapman identified Tessier's photo. Along with the picture, Tessier's former girlfriend at the time of the crime provided an unused military train ticket from Rockford to Chicago dated December 1957. Investigators took this to suggest that, contrary to Tessier's alibi, he did not take the train on his trip to Chicago and instead drove there, which means he could have returned to Sycamore on the afternoon of December 3, kidnapped Maria, and driven to Rockford. In July 2011, the Seattle Police Department, which had joined the Illinois State Police in the investigation, brought McCullough in for questioning. At first, McCullough spoke calmly and cooperated, but when asked about the murder of Maria Ridulph and his whereabouts on the night of the crime, he became evasive and aggressive. After McCullough refused to answer more questions, he was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph and extradited to Illinois. Maria's body was exhumed that same month to look for evidence of possible intruder DNA, but none could be found. However, a forensic anthropologist discovered that Maria had been stabbed in the throat at least 3 times with a sharp object. The news of the arrest in a 54-year-old murder case garnered national attention. In the September 2012 trial, the prosecution argued that McCullough was attracted to Maria and decided to kidnap her, but ended up taking her life. They presented new autopsy reports suggesting that Maria had been fatally wounded. 3 inmates who had been incarcerated with McCullough testified that he had talked about killing Maria. However, their stories were inconsistent. One inmate said McCullough talked about strangling Maria with a wire, while another claimed McCullough accidentally suffocated her while trying to prevent her from screaming. The defense argued that the prosecutors and police were pressured by the Ridulph and Tessier families to solve the case and implicate McCullough, even though there was no physical evidence, motive, or indication that McCullough was in the area when Maria was kidnapped. McCullough did not take the stand in his own defense, following his lawyer's advice. On September 14, 2012, McCullough was found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. He was 73 years old at the time of the sentencing. In 2015, McCullough, acting pro se, representing himself, filed a post-conviction petition seeking to overturn his murder conviction. After the court initially dismissed McCullough's petition as frivolous and without merit, the public defender who had originally represented McCullough at trial and had continued to investigate the case while staying in contact with McCullough, despite no longer being appointed to represent him, asked the court to reconsider the dismissal. In response to the motions, the county's state prosecutor, Richard Schmack, who had replaced Clay Campbell in that position, conducted a thorough review of the evidence. This led Schmack to conclude that McCullough could not have committed the crime and was, in fact, innocent. According to Schmack, there was no evidence presented at the trial that clearly established McCullough's whereabouts on the night of Maria Ridulph's abduction and supported his alibi. In particular, Illinois Bell telephone records showed that McCullough had made a collect call to his mother that night from a payphone in downtown Rockford, rather than from Sycamore, as alleged in his trial. Given the timing of the phone call, the approximately 40-mile distance between Sycamore and Rockford, and the icy road conditions, Schmack concluded that McCullough could not have been in Sycamore at the time of Maria Ridulph's disappearance. On April 15, 2016, an Illinois Circuit Court judge overturned McCullough's original conviction and sentence and ordered a new trial. McCullough, who still faced charges, was released on bail that day pending the new trial. McCullough was declared innocent of the crime by the DeKalb County Circuit Court on April 12, 2017. And with that, dear listener, we conclude today's case. I look forward to joining you again as we delve into the intricate details of some of history's most dreadful crimes. Until next time on Unreal True Crime, farewell.